Hello, welcome to Good Thinking Live. Welcome to the conversation. Welcome, good thinkers, regular good thinkers to the show. Welcome here. New good thinkers, welcome here. Let everyone know who you are and where you're from in the chat. We're going to try to bring in all of your questions and comments. Sometimes it scrolls too quickly and I can't get to them all, but they are all valued. And I really appreciate your being here because this is the time that we have to allow ourselves each week to just steal a little bit of time away from all the time we're told what to think so we can luxuriate in thinking about our thinking to improve how we think. And today's topic is one of my favorites. As someone who lives at this intersection or does at least works at this intersection of applied curiosity and critical thinking in order to make better decisions, better questions is central to the entire experiment, to the entire endeavor. So definitely let us know who you are and where you're from in the chat, and we'll get started. Some of this stuff in terms of asking better questions is less obvious than it seems. And so we're going to get into what you think about questions. We're going to do a little bit of research, and I'm going to give an equation that will hopefully empower you in every aspect of your life, because the quality of the answers we get in our life, in our work, in our relationships is directly correlated with the quality of questions we ask. So if you're in a situation with your subordinates or your team members or your boss or relationships, and you're in a situation where you go to a party and you just didn't have a good conversation. You felt like things were flat, or you have a meeting and you felt like the outcome really didn't kind of unravel the way you wished it to unravel. The place that you can go, kind of like if you don't feel well and you think, okay, is it something I ate? Do I have the flu? Do I have something else wrong with me? The place that you can go to diagnose kind of less than great conversations or less than great communication, the place that you can go is directly to your questions. So that's what we're going to do today. Let me say hello from, Stephen, hello from the Beaver State. Welcome from the Beaver State. Ray, let's see. Welcome from Pennsylvania. And Jeffrey, Ontario, Canada. Wait, we have two. We also have Michael. Michael and Jeffrey, do you know each other? I know it's a very big place, but it is kind of fun to have two good thinkers from Ontario. Is it Ontario or Ontario? Anyway, okay. Welcome, everyone. Here is my first question. Here is the first question. If you could ask anyone any question, who and what would you ask? And just put it in the chat and we'll get to it as we go. But who and what would you ask? And here's the follow-on question. Would you be brave enough to hear the answer? And how often do you not ask questions because, one, you're afraid of the answer, or two, you don't want to look stupid? Because those are two big things. One, you're afraid of the answer. You don't want to look stupid, or you don't want to look rude, or you don't want to look bad. You don't want to create a bad impression. Okay. Hi from Boston. Welcome, good thinker from Boston. And we have got from Toronto. Welcome from Toronto. Yay. So we've got a lot of Canadians here today. Good for the northern neighbors. I'm here on the west coast of the United States, 9 a.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. Mondays, you good thinkers know, to show up here to have a little bit of a conversation, to just catapult our week, to give ourselves time to think. All right, so how can you go to bed smarter than when you woke up? Ask better questions. And here's the thing. How can you master the best of what other people have already figured out? Ask better questions. Asking better questions is the key to everything. It's the key to communication and how people envision you, to what you know and how you can navigate the world. And one of the reasons that people don't ask questions is they might be afraid of the answer. And the other is that they may not be comfortable with the impression that asking the question might leave. So there's kind of the front end where you might be uncomfortable or you don't know what to ask or you might feel awkward. And then it's the back end where you might not receive the information that you want. So that's where we are. We're going to get into it, and I'm going to hopefully take away all of those concerns and fears so that you have a recipe for thinking about how to ask better questions and a lot of evidence as to why. All right, we focus a lot on answers. Is anyone putting in the chat who they would ask and what they would ask? Put in the chat who you would ask and we'll use yours. Maybe we'll use yours. All right. We focus a lot on answers because answers are the solution to problems. And we assign less value to questions. We hear that there are no dumb questions, so we think questions are easy, and it's the answers that take the work. How many people think that it is true that there are no dumb questions? How many think? So do you think that there are no dumb questions, or do you think there are some dumb questions? Do you believe it or not? Let us know. All right. So let's see. Ray says, who to ask questions of? Richard Dawkins, maybe. Oh, Olivier Saboni, Neil deGrasse Tyson. Neil deGrasse Tyson's a good one. Yeah, those are excellent. And anyone else listen to, I accidentally skipped Ray's question, but I said, hi, welcome from Barkley from DC. All right, so let's get back to Ray's question. Anyone else listen to No Stupid Questions podcast by Duckworth? Okay. Do you think that there are no dumb questions? Yes or no? Okay, Arvin, I would ask the president what it takes to run the government. Ooh, that's a good one. And that's a nice open-ended question so that you could really get some insight into what the president is thinking. What does it take to run the government? I like that one. That one gets a rubber chicken. Nice open-ended question. Which would be a closed question would be, do you have what it takes to run the government? Yes or no? That's a closed-ended. And a lot of people, to kind of piggyback on that, a lot of people think, open-ended questions are always good. Not necessarily. And we'll get into how to think about what type of question you should ask, and then a complete formula and recipe for asking better ones. All right. So Stephen says, not sure if there are dumb questions, but there are a lot of annoying ones. Yes, there are annoying questions, and you're probably the recipient of some of my annoying questions. However, are there no dumb questions? I'll ask a follow-on. What about bad questions? Are there bad questions? Because if there are good questions, that makes an assumption that questions are on a continuum. Or if there are smart questions, that makes an assumption that questions are on a continuum. So is it really true that there are no dumb questions? And are we being so precious by saying, okay, that wasn't the smartest question, but we don't want to call it a dumb question? What's the difference between not the smartest question and kind of a dumb question? Semantics. So I have a hint to think about the fact that there are better questions. And we know this. We talk about how to ask better questions. So let's just talk about the fact that the not better ones, you could call them dumb, you could call them annoying. Annoying might be different than dumb. I think you're right. But let's just talk about the fact that there are qualitatively better questions. And you can call the ones that aren't qualitatively better whatever you want, but we all need to face the facts that some questions are just not that great, particularly when you start with your objectives. Okay, so Barkley says, let's see, some questions are definitely dumb to ask. Either they should be known already or it's a bad idea to ask them. I'm going to give that one a rubber chicken because let's just not be precious about it. If you are going into a situation where you have not done the research and you have not done the work and you therefore ask a question that could have been Googled ahead of time and you knew you were in this conversation, that might be a dumb question. All right. What about, let's see, Ray says, there are some dumb questions, but far fewer people think are dumb. Right. I agree with that too. Some people think questions are dumb because they're not curious about the layers that question could be smart. I completely agree with that. What is dumb to one is illuminating to another. Hasty moral judgments, labeling, critical thinking killers. Yes, yes, yes. But in the event that you're using questions in a strategic way to either do one of the two things that questions do, which we'll get into, not thinking about the purpose of your question may lead you down a path that takes you farther away from your goal. Now you could say, maybe I'll explore new things. That's true. All right. So Michael says, doesn't it depend on the level of the questioner? Sometimes it does it? That's a good question. Could depend. We're going to get into it and see if at the end you you see what you think at the end. Let's keep them coming. Also, some questions have a false premise. Ooh, some questions have a false premise. If we're going to get into leading questions and how if you lead with a question with a false premise, it could land you in some quicksand. All right. So, like I said, we focus a lot on answers, and that makes it seem like questions are easy. And if there are no dumb questions, we don't have to spend time really trying to get better ones, because, anything you're curious about, you can ask. But how do you get curious? Can you get strategically curious? Let me share a little bit of research, because we always have to kind of find a little bit of research to share each week. All right. So this is in a recent study, researchers assessed thousands of natural conversations among participants who were getting to know each other. And they were either on online chats or in-person speed dating. So the researchers told group A to ask many questions, at least ask 9 questions in 15 minutes. And they told group B to ask very few questions, no more than 4 in 15 minutes. And there was no qualitative training, just ask questions. So you could be asking just like boom, 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 random questions. In the online chats, people who were randomly assigned to ask many questions were better liked by their conversation partners and learned more about their partner's interests, regardless of the quality of the question. So you could say, well, that goes to show there are no dumb questions. So quantity of questions does clearly matter. So for example, when quizzed about their partner's preferences for activities like reading and cooking and exercising, high question askers were more likely to guess correctly. So there is kind of like innovation or ideas. Coming up with a lot of ideas means you're going to come up with a lot of bad ideas, but you're also going to come up with a lot of good ones. So that's kind of a similar thing with questions, which is kind of interesting. And among the speed daters, people were more willing to go on a second date with partners who asked more questions. In fact, asking just one more question on each date meant the participant persuaded one additional person over the course of 20 dates to go out with them again. So I thought that was kind of interesting. If you're looking for a date or a friend, asking more questions. So maybe just the quantity to start with. Another study found that asking tough questions first made more people willing to open up. So people were more willing to open up to sensitive information if questions were asked in decreasing order of intrusiveness, which is kind of weird. That also probably had something to do with how you ask the question. So for example, if I meet you right now and I say to you, what is something that you're most afraid of people finding out about you? That might seem weird, especially if I said, hey, what's something you're most afraid of people finding out about you? You might think, oh. So the tone of the asker does, but turns out that asking more intrusive questions at the outset leads people to open up more than asking like, so where are you from? Kind of interesting, not necessarily intuitive. And Ray says, good questions help define a problem statement. Exactly. And yet we so value answers over questions and train ourselves in problem solving. And so little is really known about how to ask good questions when you dismiss the art by saying there are no bad ones. So if there are no bad ones, why should I spend time working on creating good ones? Like, there are bad answers for sure. We know that. But if you say that there are no bad questions, then it's not that important that I spend time asking good questions. Another study, the last study we'll talk about, then we'll get into kind of the art of the question. Participants were told either that most others in the study were willing to reveal stigmatizing answers, or most were not willing to reveal stigmatizing answers. So I said, hey, a lot of people in the study really open up and tell us a lot about themselves. And then you might say, to group B, a lot of people don't really reveal a lot about themselves. So what do you think the outcome was? For participants who were told that others were forthcoming, a lot of people reveal. What do you think? Were they more likely or less likely to reveal sensitive answers? What do you think? If the group was told everyone reveals sensitive answers. Was that person more likely or less likely to reveal sensitive answers? Let us know in the chat. All right. As you do that, then I'll reveal to you, because there's a 10-second delay in our, I think a 10-second delay on LinkedIn, and maybe if you're subscribing on YouTube or joining us on YouTube, you're not necessarily seeing the LinkedIn comments. And if you are on LinkedIn, you're not seeing the YouTube comments, but there's a little bit of a delay between the two. All right. So I will tell you that those who were told that other people were forthcoming with sensitive information were 27% more likely to reveal sensitive answers than those who were told, a lot of people don't reveal. Yes, of course, more likely because of social proof. And that kind of makes sense. I mean, more likely if they think everyone else is doing it. So that tells you, how can you use that to your advantage in asking questions? More likely, absolutely. How can you use that to your advantage? I ask this question of a lot of people, and a lot of people really like thinking about this question for maybe 10 seconds or so before answering it. So you might get a more thoughtful answer if you frame the question, letting people know how other people respond. Or a lot of people really like this. I mean, maybe at first they feel like, wow, this is kind of a weird question, but then they realize it's a fun question to answer. So that's a little hint at how you can ask a question where you're greasing the skids. You're telling people, okay, your initial feeling might be this is a little invasive, but you'll realize later that I want to answer this question. So that's a little hint at how you can put frosting on a maybe more invasive or more intrusive, but meaningful question where you might get a more meaningful answer. All right. Now I asked this question in my course on LinkedIn Learning Applied Curiosity. So how many of you have taken Applied Curiosity, that course? That was my very first LinkedIn Learning course that we recorded. How many of you have taken this? And here's the question. When was the last time that you were in a meeting waiting to ask a question and you're thinking, why haven't they thought about this? Or I need to be involved in this process. Do they even know I'm here? Or what the heck are they even talking about? So if you had to say which one is more, I'm sitting in a meeting and a lot of times I'm thinking to myself, why haven't they thought of this? And then you think, well, maybe I'm just being, maybe they have, and this is just too obvious. So that's kind of A. Or B, I need to be involved in this process. Do they even know I'm here? That's B. Or C, what are they even talking about? C. So A, B, or C. Which one, we've all been in those meetings, it could be on Zoom as of late, but which one do you feel most likely? A, why haven't they thought of this? B, do they know I'm here? C, what the heck are they talking about? Like, I don't even get it. Which one of those do you experience more frequently? We've all been there. So how can you go from wondering these things that most of us have thought, I don't see any A, B, or C's yet, confess, that most of us have thought, to asking a good question and maybe asking one specific question, the most valuable question that will get you to your goals. So Arvin says, I've been in the A state most likely. Me too. Why haven't they thought of that? And sometimes I think, oh, they have thought of that. I just didn't realize. I agree with that. C, I don't even know what's going on. C, I don't even know what's going on. B, do they even know I'm here? C, I don't even know what's going on. We've all, Jeffrey, C, we've all had these experiences. We've all done this. And then we think, okay, so what do we do with this information? What do we do with this information? The MVQ, the most valuable question, is the one question that you can ask that has the highest return on your investment. And that presupposes that you've thought about what your investment in this question should be. And the first thing you should do to be able to ask the MVQ, and let me take a step back and say, some people say, well, you don't have to just ask one question. You are correct. It's the process of elimination. It's the process of thinking about your MVQ, your most valuable question, that gets you practicing asking better questions. So it's not like you only have one question, but sometimes you only do. And when you do, if you have practiced and practiced and practiced asking those MVQs, you're just going to become better at asking better questions. And the first thing you need to do, even before you even start, like, what's an MVQ and what do I do, is you need to determine the goal for your question. And the good thing is, goals for questions are really one of two goals. Anyone want to guess what they are? I won't give it to you. Guess in the chat what they are. There's two goals for asking questions, and you can lump all the sub goals into these two goals. One, information exchange, to learn something, to obtain a certificate, something where you're trying to gain information. Now, the reasons could be curiosity, career advancement, getting a date. It doesn't matter, but gaining information. And the second one is impression management, managing what people think about you for specific goals. It could be a goal, like I said, getting a job. You might want to ask a question that makes you look smarter. And the motivation is less about getting that information than giving information, like showing someone that you ask a good question. All right, so let's see what you say. We've got people in meetings should use the wait method. Why am I talking? Yes. Yes, that's good. I like that. Why am I talking? Oh, I haven't heard that. Oh, I like that. All right. And then Arvin says, there is one more technique I came across. Next logical question. Ooh, I want to know more about that. LinkedIn Learning user. I don't know who this is, because this is what it looks like to me, which is to seek understanding. To seek understanding could be in group one, like seeking more information. And it could be in group two, impression management. So that's a good one. To show off. Yes, to show off, impression management. But even in a positive way, maybe to even show that you are connected to that person, to show that you care. Lamppost questions seeking support instead of illumination. Excellent. Oh, I love it. I love all the terminology too. I love things like wait or lamppost question, where you can get these terms, and it helps you with these visual metaphors. I love it. So the first thing is to consider the context of your question, so that you don't ask the right question at the wrong time. Context. So you've got your goal, and the second thing is your context. You don't want to ask the right question at the wrong time, or the wrong question at the right time. I guess the wrong question at the right time would make a lot of sense. To think about that. Does that make sense? Not really. All right. Because context is determined by relationship, role, time, and place the question is asked. We all play different roles at different times. You might be leading a meeting, and you turn over the meeting to someone who's going to be presenting, and all of a sudden your phone rings, and you think, wow, that person should not be calling me. This is an emergency. And you pick up, you go out of the meeting, excuse yourself, you go out of the meeting, and you've gone from the leader in that moment to a parent. Maybe it's your child's school called, or a patient, maybe the doctor called, or a spouse, maybe your wife or husband or partner called. So your context can change in a split second. So you have to think about this, because, I once went to a doctor when I was pregnant, and, they did the whole pregnancy exam. And then the next weekend I was at a party where that doctor was, and it was like, ooh, this person has seen me in my pregnancy stuff. So my point is that different contexts, different roles, and different relationships. So you have to consider the context. A question that your doctor asks you in the room with you as a patient is different than that doctor asking you the same question at a party. So you have to think about your goals and the context. And those are two really important things as you're creating your MVQ to think about ahead of time, because that helps you. That helps prepare you. All right. Now we're going to get into, I'm just going to skip right to the formula, because then we can get into all kinds of different questions and how to ask. But the formula that you can use to really transform the quality of your questions is a prepared question, curiosity, plus a follow-on question. So if you go to a party, for example, and you come back from that party and you think that was a great party, you might think, why was that a great party? Well, the food was good. This conversation was good. Maybe they had entertainment. Maybe the setting was beautiful. But the way to assess whether that experience is easily replicated is to really assess the quality of your questions that you asked at that party. And some people say, well, gosh, I go into a networking event. I know no one. So I create these like 3 key questions that I ask. Like I go in and say, hey, how should I think about what new projects you're working on, or what new maybe you try to break out of the questions like, what do you do, or where are you from, or you come here frequently, whatever. It's okay to ask those tried and true questions. It really is okay. But what you want to do is, if that's the best you've got, that's the best you've got, you want to then get curious about how they answer. So where are you from? Oh, I'm from Portland, Oregon. Oh, what you don't want to do is skip to another question. Oh, do you come here frequently? What you want to do is add curiosity and do a follow-on question. Oh, Portland. How do you think about Portland? I mean, I read a lot about what's going on in Portland, or maybe you don't know anything about Portland. You could say something like, what's something that would surprise most people about Portland, like even tourists? So the point is, this is a recipe for saying, okay, you can ask a question. Maybe you prepare a question ahead of time because you're not really comfortable. You prepare a question, you add curiosity, and then you add a follow-on question. That's the recipe. That's the recipe. And we'll get into a bunch of other things. We only have 4 or 5 more minutes. So I want to make sure we get to this all, because this is a huge topic. I mean, how many of you would like to do more on questions? How many of you would like to do more on answers? All right. I think the quality of the questions is probably even more important than the quality of the answers, because it determines the quality of your answers. So if you come back from a party and you cannot think of a question that you asked, something you got curious about, and a follow-on question that you've asked, then chances are you had more fun at that party with someone than they had with you. And this is because the way you are perceived, how much you are liked, is directly related to how interested you were versus how interesting you tried to be. So, example of a follow-on question. All right, if I will give you any follow-on question you ask, that you want, if you give me a basic question that you could bring to a party. You put a basic question in the chat, and I'll give you a follow-on question. Anything. So you start with a question. It could be, come here often? And they say, yes, I do. What is something each time you come here that surprises you, or would surprise someone who has never been here before? That's a good follow-on question. There is nothing with enough curiosity that you can be given the most boring answer to the most trite question. With enough curiosity, you can ask a follow-on question. And if you leave that party or that interview or that meeting or that presentation without being able to identify follow-on questions you've asked, even if you thought it was an incredible date, party, networking event, meeting, or interview, chances are they didn't think it as much as you thought it. And the research is clear. So let's go over some of the other quick types of questions. I think follow-on. Okay, here we go. Ray says, do you have any hobbies? Okay, do you have any hobbies? Yes, I do. I have a new hobby of playing pickleball. Let's just say I'm going to play both roles. So do you have any hobbies? Yes, I have a new hobby of playing pickleball. Now that's a nice magnanimous answer. What if I said, do you have any hobbies? Not really. How do people like our age or as adults acquire new hobbies? It feels like, you said you don't have any hobbies. Sometimes I think, do I have enough hobbies? How do we acquire hobbies? Now that would be really nice because someone lobbed you a really lame answer to a question, do you have any hobbies? And you had to take the baton and run with it. But there is always, with enough curiosity, you can always ask a good follow-on question. And if you take anything away from today, because I have like positive and negative questions, I have all this stuff, avoid asking leading questions, exciting questions. So maybe we'll do a round 2 where we get into all of this. Tell me if you want a round 2 for questions, and we can even do it next week because I've got so much here. Exciting questions and the research behind that, positive questions, empowering questions, envelope questions. I love envelope questions. So maybe today's lesson is the recipe for really the beginning recipe for asking the most valuable questions to build a relationship. And that is any question that you prepare, a prepared question. Now, if your prepared question has already been answered, beware of asking it. We've all been in interviews where someone says, or not we've all, but maybe many of us have been in interviews where someone asks a question that that they prepared ahead of time because you already answered it. That's like crazy. Like, oh, I'm from Portland, Oregon. And then someone says, well, where are you from? And then they're like, oops, because that was clearly a question that they had prepared ahead of time. I would argue that's a dumb question because you weren't listening. You weren't curious. You were prepared, but you weren't curious. Preparation without curiosity means you're not really that prepared. Because if you ask me where I'm from and I just told you because that was a question you brought, not a good question. Okay, so April says round 2. Jeff says round 2. Michael says round 2. Okay, we're going to do round 2 next Monday. And I might put this in the LinkedIn Learner office hours. Next Monday, we're going to do a round 2 with these questions. So anyone here who can show up next Monday with an example, even test this, where they asked a question, even if it was like a basic, boring question, like, come here often, or, what do you do? And then added curiosity and came up with a good follow-on question. Bring it to the show next week. And we're going to dissect all these other types of questions. But if you come away with nothing for this week, question, curiosity, follow-on. Do not leave a party without thinking, did I ask follow-on questions? Because if you didn't, then you've missed an opportunity to be more interesting, create more interest in what you do. And also, it's nice. You're seen as a nicer person. You're seen as a more generous person because you've taken the time to be curious about someone. And that is both an exciting and empowering question. Okay, so Michael says, the questions should be prepared based on the type of function. You are not going to ask about nuclear physics at a wedding. Why not? Are you not asking about nuclear physics at a wedding? Okay. Like I love the whole idea of quantum computing. I'm not any way, shape, or form an expert, but I have been overwhelmed by the conversations I've had at, a Halloween party, even a wedding, about quantum computing. So would you not ask about nuclear physics at a wedding? Maybe you would. If it was exciting to that person, because a follow-on question is recognizing that what's exciting to that person is also exciting to you. And that's the biggest thing when asking questions, because you're going to get more. And depending on your goal, you're going to get more information. You're going to learn you're going to learn about what other people already know, and you're going to be more likable. You think, oh, I don't care about being likable. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Because when you're likable, your life is easier, and you have more persuasion abilities and influence abilities in a positive way. You can make the world a better place for yourself and for others. So we'll be back for round 2 with questions. Thank you so much for your participation. Tell everyone who wants to know about questions to show up, bring your questions. And if you can, think about a question. If this is a basic question you asked and a scenario, like if you try it this week, bring it. Maybe we'll bring you into the conversation and bring your scenario, and we can learn from you. So thank you, everyone, all the good thinkers who are here each week, and all of the new good thinkers. And if you're coming in after the live show, go ahead, put your stuff in the chat. Let's get in. Let's do it. We need each other. Thanks so much for being here. See you next week.